The sky broke open without warning. One moment, Hattie was still on the trail, boots sinking into wet earth, rope wrapped tight around her palms. The next, the world went dark. Rain came down like it had been waiting for her to look up. Thunder cracked so close it shook the ground under her feet. The cows felt it before she did. 6 heads jerked up at once, 6 bodies tensed. Then panic took over. "No, wait, easy, girl, easy," Hattie shouted, her voice swallowed by the wind. The rope burned as it slid against her skin. Mud sucked at her boots. One cow bolted, then another. Then all of them pulling in different directions, muscles stronger than her fear, stronger than her prayers. She was dragged forward, knees slamming into the ground, dress soaked through in seconds. Rain stung her eyes. Lightning split the trees ahead, white and violent. For a heartbeat, she thought she could still hold them. Then the rope tore free. Hattie watched it disappear into the dark, 6 shadows vanishing into the forest like they'd never belonged to her at all. She didn't scream. She just sank into the mud, hands shaking, chest burning, rain plastering her hair to her face. 6 cows. That was everything she had left. Her mother's voice echoed in her head, thin and tired from months of sickness. "Take them west. Don't give up. Silver Creek will give you a chance." Hattie pressed her forehead into the ground. "Please," she whispered, not sure who she was talking to anymore. "Please, God, I can't lose them. I don't have anything else." Thunder answered instead. "I've seen people hit that moment before. The one where the math finally breaks, where you realize losing this isn't an inconvenience. It's the end of the road, and there's no one around to notice." Hattie pushed herself up, soaked, shaking, and looked toward the trees. She took one step forward. Then a voice came from behind her. Low, steady, close enough to be real. "You'll die if you go in there." She froze. Hattie turned slowly. A man stood a few paces back, rain running off the brim of his hat, coat dark and heavy with water. His horse didn't move, didn't spook, just stood there like the storm was nothing new. "I can help," the man said. "Not kind, not cruel, just honest. But not like this." She opened her mouth to speak. Nothing came out. Before we rewind and see how Hattie ended up alone in a thunderstorm with 6 cows as her entire world, tell me, where are you right now, and what are you doing as you listen to this story? 3 months earlier, the world had been quieter, not kinda, just quieter. September of 1879 came with yellow grass and the smell of medicine that never quite left the room. Hattie remembered that smell more than anything else. Bitter herbs, old cloth, damp wood, her mother's breathing, shallow and careful, like each breath needed permission. Consumption, the doctor had said, as if naming it made it manageable. Hattie sat by the bed every night, her large hands folded in her lap, listening, watching the woman who had taught her how to milk cows, how to pray when there was nothing left to trade, how to stand still when people looked at you like you were in the way. When her mother died, there was no inheritance in the way people imagine one. No money sewn into hymns, no land deed hidden in a Bible. There were 6 cows, 6 living, breathing chances. "They'll keep you alive," her mother whispered near the end, voice already halfway gone. "Milk, calves, trade. Don't sell them cheap. Take them west. Silver Creek has water that doesn't run dry. People who still help each other." Hattie nodded, even though fear sat heavy in her chest. She had heard of Silver Creek. Everyone had. good soil, clean water, and eyes that measured you before they listened. After the burial, she sold what little she could. A broken chair, 2 plates, a coat that never fit right anyway. She kept the wagon, the cows, and 1 change of clothes. 40 miles didn't sound far on paper. It was far when you walked beside a creaking wagon, when the axle screamed every mile, when your boots filled with mud and your hands went numb from holding reins too long. It was far when nights were cold and people in passing towns looked at her body before they looked at her face. Too big, too slow, too much. No one said it outright. They didn't have to. Hattie learned early how to take up less space with her voice, even when her body refused to cooperate. She slept beside the cows when she could, wrapped in a thin blanket, listening to them breathe. She'd talk to them like they were people. Sometimes they were kinder listeners. By the time the clouds started gathering, she was close. She could feel it in the air, that strange mix of hope and dread that comes when the road might finally end. Silver Creek was supposed to be 15 miles past the ridge, 15 miles from safety, from a place where she could sell milk, trade calves, start again. If she made it. The storm rolled in faster than she expected. Wind first, then rain, then the sky turning the wrong color. Hattie told herself to push on. Just a little farther, just until the trees thinned. If I lose the cows, she thought, the truth finally sharp enough to hurt, I don't get to try again. That was what made her grab the rope tighter when the thunder cracked. What made her fight the pull even when her arms screamed, and when the rope slipped free and the cows vanished into the forest. Something inside her went quiet. I've carried that kind of quiet before, the kind that settles in when your last plan collapses. It doesn't scream, it just sits there, heavy and patient. That was the quiet Hattie knelt in when the rain soaked her through and the ground swallowed her knees. And that was the moment the voice came from behind her. Not loud, not rushed, just real. You'll die if you go in there. She turned, heart hammering, and saw him for the first time. Not as a savior, not as an answer, just as a man who understood storms well enough not to argue with them. Hattie turned slowly, rain blurring her vision, heart still pounding from the loss she hadn't finished mourning yet. The man stood a few paces back, half shadowed by the trees, not looming, not rushing, just planted there, like he belonged to this stretch of mountain the way the rocks and pines did. His coat was dark with rain, heavy wool clinging to his frame. His hat brim funneled water off in steady lines. A horse stood behind him, calm in a way that only came from long familiarity with storms. The animal didn't spook, didn't shift. That alone told Hattie something. I can't just leave them, she said, voice breaking before she meant it to. Those cows are everything I have. The man didn't argue with her feelings. He just looked past her, toward the black mouth of the forest, where the herd had vanished. In weather like this, he said, voice low and even, they'll keep moving downhill, panicked. You won't catch them, and you won't come back out if you try. His words weren't cruel. They were precise, like someone stating the weight of a stone before dropping it. I have to try, Hattie said, taking a step toward the trees. He moved then, fast, not grabbing her, but stepping into her path, palm out. No, he said, just that. No shouting, no softness either. You go in there, you die. Storm's turning. Ground's already slick. She hated him for saying it, hated the calm in his voice, Hated that part of her knew he was right. Lightning split the sky again close enough that the thunder punched the air out of her lungs. The rain came harder, sideways now, needling her skin. She wrapped her arms around herself. Soaked dress, clinging, teeth chattering. "Then what am I supposed to do?" she asked. Not accusing, just empty. The man looked at her properly for the first time then, not her size, not her soaked clothes, her face. "I'm Elijah Grant," he said, as if names mattered less than decisions. "I've got a cabin 5 miles west. You can survive the night there." "And my cows?" she asked. His jaw tightened, just a fraction. "If the storm lets up by morning, I'll track them. If not—" He didn't finish the sentence. Sometimes honesty sounds like mercy. Sometimes it just hurts. Hattie stared at the forest one last time. 6 dark shapes gone. 6 chances running on their own fear. She felt something crack inside her, not loudly, just enough. I've seen that look before. The moment someone realizes bravery isn't charging forward. Sometimes it's choosing not to die for something that might already be lost. Elijah followed her gaze, then spoke again, quieter this time. "You stay here. You freeze. You follow me. You live. That's what I can offer." Another thunderclap answered for him. Hattie swallowed, rain and tears indistinguishable. She nodded once. "Okay?" Elijah turned toward his horse, already moving. He didn't look back to see if she followed. But he did say one thing over his shoulder, steady as the ground he trusted. "Come with me." Elijah didn't waste time explaining the plan. He moved like someone who had already measured the storm and accepted its terms. The wagon was abandoned without ceremony. One quick glance at the axle, another at the sky, and that was it. He looped the wagon's lead rope around the saddle horn, tight and efficient, anchoring it to the horse like an afterthought. The animal shifted once, then stilled, trusting him. "Up," Elijah said. Hattie hesitated. Her legs were numb. Her hands shook. She looked at the height of the saddle like it was a wall. "I can't—" Elijah stepped in, close enough that she could smell wet wool and rain and something clean underneath it. He bent, slid an arm around her back and another under her knees, and lifted. Not gently, not roughly, decisively. "Hold on," he said, already settling her onto the saddle in front of him. Tight. The horse stepped forward as thunder cracked again, so close it rattled her teeth. Hattie gasped and grabbed the front of Elijah's coat, fingers digging into the thick fabric. "Not there," he said calmly, adjusting her hands to his forearm. "Here, lock your arms." She did, wrapping both arms around him, her cheek pressed against his chest before she could think too much about it. His heartbeat was steady, not fast, not afraid. The trail disappeared almost immediately. What remained was mud, water, and instinct. Rain lashed sideways, stinging her face. The horse slipped once, and Hattie's breath caught as she pitched forward. Elijah's arm came back instantly, firm against her spine, keeping her anchored. "I've got you," he said. Not loud, not dramatic, just factual. Lightning lit the forest in sharp white flashes. Trees bent, water rushed under the horse's hooves, cold and fast. Hattie buried her face against Elijah's shoulder, breathing him in because there was nothing else to hold on to. She felt every shift of his body, the way he leaned with the terrain, how his knees guided the horse without force. He didn't speak again. He didn't need to. I've learned something about trust. It doesn't arrive with promises. It shows up when someone keeps you upright while the ground is trying to take you down. Minutes blurred into something longer or shorter. Time doesn't behave normally in storms. Then, through the curtain of rain, a darker shape appeared. Straight lines where nature usually refused them. A cabin. Elijah slowed the horse, guiding it toward the door. He swung down first, boots sinking into mud, then lifted Hattie again, setting her on her feet. She swayed. He steadied her with one hand at her elbow. Inside, he said. She stumbled forward, every muscle shaking, heart still racing. Behind her, Elijah tied the horse, quick and sure, then followed her to the door. The storm roared on. But for the first time that night, Hattie stepped somewhere that didn't move beneath her feet. The cabin wasn't large. One room, rough-hewn logs, a low ceiling that held the heat instead of letting it escape. But it was alive. A small fire still burned in the hearth, not roaring, just steady. The smell of smoke and pine sap cut through the wet cold, clinging to Hattie's skin. A table stood against the wall. 2 chairs, hooks with coats hung neatly, not tossed. A place where things were put back because someone expected to need them again. Elijah closed the door behind them, shutting out the howl of the storm. The sound dropped instantly, like the world had taken a breath. "Stand there," he said, nodding toward the fire. "Don't move." Hattie obeyed. Her dress clung to her legs, heavy with rain. Water pooled at her feet. Her hands trembled uncontrollably now that she wasn't fighting the wind anymore. Elijah crossed the room, already pulling a dry blanket from a shelf. He draped it around her shoulders, firm and practical. "You'll get sick if you stay like this," he said. "Change if you can. Anything dry." She opened her mouth to ask how or where, but he was already shrugging out of his soaked coat. "I'm going back out," he added. Her head snapped up. "What?" "The cows," he said like it was obvious. "Storm's easing on the west side. If they didn't scatter too far, I can still track them." Hattie stared at him. "In this weather? You could—" "I know this forest," he said. Not defensive, not proud, just certain. He pulled on a heavier coat, one already worn at the elbows. "They're your livelihood. I don't leave that kind of thing if there's a chance." Something in her chest tightened. No one had ever gone back into a storm for her before, not for anything that belonged to her. "You don't have to," she said quickly. "You've already—" He paused, one hand on the door. For the first time since she met him, he looked at her instead of past her. "I know," he said. "I'm still going." Thunder rolled again, farther off now. The rain had softened just enough to make the choice possible and dangerous at the same time. Hattie hugged the blanket tighter. "Then at least, please be careful." Elijah hesitated. Just a breath. "I will," he said, and this time there was something gentler in it. "Stay warm. Don't open the door unless it's me." He stepped outside, pulling the door shut behind him. The sound of the storm rushed back in, then faded as his footsteps disappeared. Hattie stood alone in the cabin, wrapped in a man's blanket, fire crackling softly in front of her. She looked down at herself, soaked, shaking, alive. And for the first time since her mother died, she realized something unsettling. She wasn't just afraid of losing the cows anymore. She was afraid of losing the man who had just walked back into the storm for them. The door stayed closed. That was the first thing Hattie noticed once the echo of Elijah's footsteps vanished into the storm. No creak, no second thoughts, just the steady, unforgiving sound of rain hitting the roof and walls like it meant to wear the place down. She stood there longer than she should have, a blanket slipping from her shoulders, boots dripping onto the wooden floor. Her fingers had gone numb. Her dress felt like it weighed twice what it had an hour earlier. "Think," she whispered to herself, voice thin in the quiet. She peeled the blanket back just long enough to wring water from her sleeves, then pulled it around her again and moved closer to the fire. Heat licked at her shins, not enough to dry anything, but enough to remind her she was still here. Alive still counted for something. She looked around the cabin properly now, not as a guest, as someone alone in it. Everything had a place. A chest by the wall, a small shelf with tools lined up, cleaned, sharpened. No clutter, no excess. This was a space built for survival, not comfort. Her gaze drifted to the chest. She hesitated. "I'm sorry," she murmured, to the empty room more than to the man who owned it. The lid creaked softly as she opened it. Inside were folded clothes, wool shirts, a pair of trousers, everything clean, everything much too big. She took one shirt, thick and heavy, still holding the faintest smell of smoke and pine and something human beneath it. She turned away from the door instinctively, even though no one was there, and pulled her wet dress over her head. The air bit at her skin. She moved quickly, slipping the shirt on, sleeves hanging past her hands, hem brushing her knees. It was warm. Not just the wool. The idea that someone else had worn this, worked in it, survived winters in it. She wrapped the blanket around herself again and curled up on the floor near the fire, knees drawn in, the oversized shirt swallowing her whole. Outside, the storm pressed on. Rain drummed the roof in uneven rhythms. Thunder rolled, farther away now, but still present enough to keep her from relaxing. Wind shoved at the walls like it wanted inside. She counted time by the fire. One log collapsed inward. She shifted closer. Another hour passed, or maybe less, or more. Her thoughts ran circles she couldn't stop. The cows, Elijah in the forest, the way he had said, "I know this forest," like it was a promise and a warning at the same time. "I've waited through nights like this." Waiting always feels longer when someone else is carrying the risk for you. She clasped her hands together, fingers stiff. "Please," she whispered, not sure who she was asking anymore. "Please, let him come back." The cabin creaked as the wind shifted direction. Something hit the wall hard enough to make her flinch. She listened for hooves. Nothing. She pressed her face into the collar of the shirt, breathing in that steady, grounded scent again. It helped more than she expected, like leaning against something solid in the dark. Another stretch of time slid by. Her eyelids drooped, then snapped open at every new sound. Then she heard it, a distant thud, another, slow, heavy. Her heart jumped so hard it hurt. She scrambled to her feet, blanket slipping, boots thudding against the floor, as she moved toward the door. She stopped herself inches from the latch. "He told me not to open it unless it's him." She waited, breath shallow. The sound came closer. Hooves this time. No mistaking it. A shadow passed the small window, a shape, then another. Hattie. His voice muffled through the door, but unmistakable. She yanked it open without thinking. Rain swept in, cold and sharp, but she barely felt it. Elijah stood there, soaked through, hair plastered to his face, mud up to his knees. Behind him, Shapes moved, 6 of them, all 6 cows, huddled and dripping, eyes wide but alive. They tried to double back, Elijah said, already moving past her, ushering the herd toward the lean-to. Took longer than I liked. Hattie laughed and sobbed at the same time. The sound surprised her as much as anything else. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him before she could talk herself out of it. Not careful, not planned, just relief spilling over. Elijah froze for half a second, then rested a broad hand between her shoulders, steadying her. "Easy," he said, voice rough. "You're shaking." "I thought—" She couldn't finish. "I know," he said, guiding her back inside, shutting the door against the storm once more. "You're going to get sick if you don't warm up." He didn't push her away. He didn't pull her closer either. Just enough. The barn door slammed shut against the wind, and suddenly the world shrank again. 6 shapes shifted in the dim light. Steam rose from their hides. Mud dripped onto packed earth. Alive, all of them. Hattie stood just inside the cabin doorway, arms still half raised from where she let go of Elijah, like her body hadn't caught up with the miracle yet. "All 6, Elijah said again, quieter now, more to himself than to her. He leaned his forehead briefly against the doorframe, eyes closed for a second longer than necessary. I noticed that moment. Men like him don't pause unless something costs them. "You did it," Hattie whispered, voice breaking in a way she didn't try to stop. "You actually—" He shook his head once. "They did. Stayed together. That's what saved them." But he didn't pull away when she reached for his sleeve, fingers clutching the wet wool like proof he was still here. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. Elijah turned toward the fire, stripping off his soaked coat, movement slower now that the danger had passed. "You don't?" he replied. "You sit, you warm up." She watched him move with a strange mix of awe and exhaustion. The storm had taken its toll. His hands trembled slightly as he fed another log into the hearth. "Sit," he repeated, firmer. She obeyed, sinking onto the bench near the fire, the oversized shirt still hanging off her frame. He noticed it then. The shirt. His shirt. He paused, then nodded once. No comment, no embarrassment. That mattered more than he could have known. "You're going to be sick if you don't sleep," he said, handing her a mug she hadn't noticed him pour. Warm water, a little salt, practical kindness. She took it with both hands. "You could have died out there." "So could you," he replied. "Difference is, you stayed where I told you." She laughed softly through lingering tears. I listened. "Good," he said. And for the first time there was something like approval in his voice. They sat like that for a while, fire crackling, storm fading into a steady rain, the cows shifting outside, safe enough for the night. Hattie's body finally stopped shaking. The fear drained out of her slowly, leaving a heavy, pleasant exhaustion behind. "I thought I'd lost everything," she said quietly. Elijah didn't answer right away. He stared into the fire, jaw working. "You didn't," he said at last. "Not tonight. I've learned something about relief. It doesn't always feel like joy. Sometimes it feels like being allowed to breathe again." Hattie set the mug down, hand steady now. She looked at Elijah across the fire, really looked. And for the first time since the storm began, she let herself believe the night might actually end. Morning came quietly, like it didn't want to startle anyone. The storm had burned itself out some time before dawn. What remained was a gray sky stretched thin, the kind that promised no more trouble but didn't offer warmth either. Hattie woke on the bench near the fire, neck stiff, blanket half slid to the floor. For one sharp second, panic flared. Then she heard it, the low, steady sound of someone moving with purpose. Elijah stood at the small table, back to her, stirring a pot over the hearth. Steam curled upward, carrying the scent of oats and cinnamon. He moved slowly now, not cautious, just tired in the way people get after the danger has passed and the body finally claims its due. "You're awake," he said without turning. "Good." Her voice came out hoarse. "I didn't mean to fall asleep." "You needed it," he replied. "Eat something." He set a bowl on the table and finally faced her. In daylight, she saw the lines she'd missed the night before. Not age. Weather. Years of paying attention to what could kill you. She took the bowl with both hands. The oats were thick, warm, simple, exactly what her body wanted. "This is good," she said. He gave a small shrug. "Been cooking for myself 15 years. You get better or you get sick." She smiled at that, then hesitated. The silence between them felt different now, not tense, just open. "You live out here alone?" she asked carefully. "Yes." "No family nearby?" Elijah looked past her, toward the door, toward the hills beyond it. "I had one," he said. The words landed heavy even before the story followed. "My wife, Anna, our boy, Samuel." He paused, like he was checking whether the name still belonged in the room. "Fever took them, same winter, 10 years ago." Hattie's spoon stilled. "They're buried on the ridge behind the cabin," he went on, voice even but thinner now. "High ground. Morning light reaches there first. I go up most days." She didn't interrupt. She'd learned, long before this moment, that grief hated being rushed. "I stayed," he said. "Didn't see the point in leaving. Built more fences, took more work. Let the days pass." He met her eyes then. There was no self-pity there, just truth. "I didn't plan on talking this much," he added. "I'm glad you did," Hattie said quietly. He nodded once, accepting that without comment. They ate in silence after that, not uncomfortable, just full. When the bowls were empty, Elijah stood and pulled on his boots. "I need to check the herd, make sure none are hurt." "I'll come," Hattie said before she could overthink it. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Stay close." They walked together into the pale morning. The ground was slick, but the air smelled clean, washed. The cows lifted their heads when they approached, calm now, chewing slowly. "All 6, Hattie murmured again, like she was afraid saying it too loud would undo it. Elijah watched her count them, something unreadable crossing his face. "They'll need a day or 2, he said. "Storm like that takes more out of them than it looks." She nodded. "So do people." That earned her a look, a real one. Back inside, he poured more water to heat and finally said the thing that had clearly been sitting with him since dawn. "Silver Creek's still 15 miles, he said. "Roads worse after storms. You shouldn't go today." "I know." He hesitated, then continued, "You can stay here, a week. Let the cows recover. I'll pay you for the work if you help." She looked at him, surprised. "You don't have to do that." "I know," he said. Then, after a beat, "I want to." There it was, not romance, not charity. A need stated plainly. "I'm tired," he added, voice low. "Tired of eating alone, tired of quiet that doesn't change." Hattie felt something shift inside her. Not pressure, permission. I've noticed that when people admit they're tired, they're really saying they don't want to be alone anymore. She nodded slowly. 1 week, she said. That's fair. Elijah exhaled like he'd been holding his breath without realizing it. Good. Outside, the clouds thinned just enough for light to break through, and for the first time since the storm took everything from her, Hattie felt like staying didn't mean giving up. It might mean beginning. They didn't shake hands. There was no need. The agreement settled between them the way some truths do, quietly and without ceremony. Elijah cleared a space on the table, moving his few belongings aside. You can sleep on the bed, he said. I'll take the loft. Hattie opened her mouth to protest, then closed it again. She recognized the tone. This wasn't negotiation. It was how he took care of things. Thank you, she said instead. He nodded, already turning back to the practicalities. Silver Creek can wait a week. The cows need rest. You'll help with meals, cleaning, keeping an eye on them. I'll pay you. Fair. How much? She asked. Same as I'd pay anyone else, he said. Not less. That landed harder than she expected. People had a way of offering her help that came with conditions. Gratitude expected, silence implied. This wasn't that. All right, she said. I can do that. I know, he replied simply. The rest of the day passed in small, necessary tasks. She helped him patch a section of fence where the storm had loosened a post. He showed her how to check the cow's legs for swelling. She learned the rhythm of the place, where tools went back, which bucket was for water and which for feed. No speeches, no explanations. That night they ate in companionable quiet again. The fire burned lower. Wind brushed the cabin walls without threatening them. As they finished, Elijah stood and hesitated, one hand on the back of his chair. This is temporary, he said, like he needed to hear it out loud. I won't stop you from going on. Hattie looked at him, really looked, at the way his shoulders held tension even now, at the careful distance he kept. I know, she said, and I appreciate you saying that. He seemed relieved by her answer, or maybe just tired enough to let the day end. She lay down on the bed that night, the mattress firm but clean, the blanket thick. From the loft above she heard Elijah shift once, then settle. The cabin creaked softly as it cooled. Hattie stared at the ceiling, listening to the sound of another person breathing somewhere in the dark. Not close, not distant either. A week, she reminded herself, just a week. But even then, some part of her already knew that weeks have a way of changing shape when you stop running. Day one began before sunrise. Hattie woke to the sound of wood splitting outside. The steady thud of the axe cut through her sleep, not harsh, just persistent. By the time she dressed and stepped out, Elijah already had a stack of firewood piled neatly against the wall, his breath fogging in the cold morning air. You didn't have to start so early, she said. He shrugged. Habit. She made breakfast. Oatmeal, slow-cooked, with a bit of dried apple she still carried in her bag and a pinch of cinnamon she'd been saving. When Elijah sat down and took his first bite, he paused. "Oh, this is good," he said. Then, after a moment, "Better than most." It wasn't praise dressed up as kindness. It was information. Hattie smiled anyway, turning back to the pot so he wouldn't see. Day two brought mud and laundry. Elijah hadn't washed most of his clothes properly in months. She didn't comment on that. She just filled the basin, heated water, scrubbed until her arms ached. By the time she finished, her hands were raw and pink. That evening she noticed the woodpile had doubled. He didn't mention it. Neither did she. Day 3 he showed her how to check the cow's hooves, how to calm them with a hand placed low and steady against their side. She learned quickly, not because she was eager to impress, but because learning meant staying alive. "You're good with them," Elijah said. "They don't rush me," she replied. "I know how that feels." He looked at her then, not long, but long enough. Day 4, snow threatened again. They spent the afternoon inside, mending. He fixed a torn harness strap while she patched socks that had been worn thin long before she arrived. The silence between them had changed. It wasn't empty anymore. It held weight, like a shared understanding that neither rushed to fill. That night he pulled a book from the shelf. Dickens. She recognized it immediately. "You read?" she asked. "Enough," he said. "Picked it up years ago." They sat by the fire, each reading a few pages, not speaking. The flames popped softly. Outside, the wind found other places to bother. I've known silences like that, the kind that don't ask you to perform. They're rare, and once you notice them, you miss them everywhere else. Day 5. He took her shooting. "Just in case," he said, handing her the rifle. "Not because I expect trouble, but because the world does." Her hand shook when she lifted it, not from fear of the gun, but from old memories of being told she was clumsy, unreliable, a liability. "Feet apart," he said. "Breathe out before you pull." She did. The shot rang out sharp and loud. The can fell over. She stared, stunned. Elijah let out a sound that might have been a laugh. It surprised them both. "Guess you learned fast," he said. She laughed too, a short disbelieving sound. It felt like something breaking loose in her chest. Day 6 came with confession. They were feeding the cows when Hattie spoke without planning to. "People used to tell me I took up too much space." Elijah didn't stop working. "People say stupid things. They said it like it was a fact," she continued, "like gravity." He straightened then, turned to face her fully. "Anyone who said that was blind." She blinked. "You don't have to." "I do," he cut in, not unkindly, "because I won't have that said here." The words settled around them like a boundary drawn in the dirt. Day 7 arrived quietly. No storm, no drama, just a pale sky and breath that steamed in the morning light. Hattie realized something as she worked. She wasn't bracing herself anymore. Not for rejection, not for the moment she'd be told to leave. The cabin felt lived in, warmed not just by fire, but by routine. That evening, Elijah stood at the door and looked out toward the trail that led away. "The cows are fit to travel tomorrow," he said. She nodded. "I know." He waited, then asked carefully, "Do you still plan to go to Silver Creek?" Hattie didn't answer right away, and that was new too. Morning came clear and quiet, the kind of morning that makes a decision feel heavier than it should. Hattie stood outside the cabin, watching the cows move slowly through the frost-damp grass. They were stronger now, calmer. Their ribs didn't show the way they had after the storm. 6 living proofs that she hadn't failed. Not this time. Elijah tightened the last strap on the wagon without looking at her. He worked the way he always did, efficient, steady, no wasted motion. If he felt anything about her leaving, he didn't show it. That hurt more than she expected. "So," she said, trying to sound practical, "Silver Creek's 15 miles from here. I should reach it by sundown if the road holds." He nodded. Road's decent after the bend. Gets muddy near the creek. That's good to know. Silence settled between them again, but not the easy kind from earlier in the week. This one pressed in on her chest. Elijah wiped his hands on a cloth, then finally looked at her. I want to ask you something, and you don't have to answer fast. She stiffened slightly. All right. Do you actually want to go to Silver Creek? He asked. Or are you going because it's the only plan you ever allowed yourself to have? The question landed hard. Hattie opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. I've been heading there since my mother died, she said slowly. She said it was a place where people helped each other, where land still meant something. And you? He asked. What do you want? No one had asked her that in years, not without attaching a condition, not without expecting the answer to be small. She looked down at her hands. I wanted a chance to work, to keep the cows, to not be turned away before I opened my mouth. He waited, didn't interrupt, didn't rush her. I didn't think wanting more than that was allowed, she added. Elijah leaned back against the fence. The wood creaked under his weight. This place, he said, gesturing toward the cabin, has been quiet for a long time, not peaceful, just empty. This week, he stopped, searching for the right words. This week it felt occupied again, like something came back. Hattie's throat tightened. I'm not asking you to stay because I need help, he continued. I can manage. I always have. She met his eyes then, really met them. I'm asking because I don't want to go back to surviving alone if I don't have to. The honesty in his voice left no room for performance, no grand promise, just truth laid bare. What if I stay and regret it? She asked quietly. He nodded once. That's a risk. And if I go? She pressed. He didn't answer immediately. Then, softly, that's one too. The cows shifted behind her, one of them lowed, impatient. Hattie took a breath. She thought of the storm, of being dragged through mud, of the moment she dropped the rope and believed it was all over. She thought of the cabin at night, the sound of Elijah chopping wood before dawn, the way he never once looked at her like she was something to be managed or endured. I've spent my whole life leaving before I could be asked to, she said. I don't want to do that again. Elijah straightened. Hope flickered across his face, quick, restrained, like a man who didn't trust good things to stay. I'm not asking you to decide forever, he said. Just choose what you want right now. Hattie looked once more toward the trail that led away, then back at the cabin, the fence, the land that had already tested her, and held. I don't want to go, she said. The words came out steady, no apology, no explanation. Elijah let out a slow breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Then stay, he said simply. Not because you owe me anything. Stay because you choose to. She nodded. I choose to. They stood there for a moment longer, neither moving, as if the world itself needed time to accept the change. Some choices don't arrive with thunder. They arrive quietly and change everything anyway. They didn't rush into anything. That mattered. The sun climbed higher, warming the damp ground, and Hattie stayed where she was, near the fence, near him, letting the weight of her decision settle into her bones. Staying wasn't a dramatic leap. It was quieter than that, and somehow braver. Elijah was the first to move. He reached for the wagon reins, then stopped, as if remembering there was no need any more. He hung them back on the post. You should know something, Hattie said. Her voice trembled just enough to betray her courage. If I stay, it can't be because you feel sorry for me. He turned fully toward her. I don't, he said immediately, too quickly to be rehearsed. She swallowed. People usually do, or they pretend not to. They see my body first. They decide what kind of woman I am before I speak. Elijah studied her face, not her shape. Then they're fools, he said, and lazy ones. That made her laugh, short and surprised. It felt like air entering a room that had been closed too long. I don't need to be rescued, she continued. I need to be chosen for who I am, and I need to choose myself, too. He nodded slowly. I don't offer pity, he said. I offer respect and truth. If that's not enough, it is, she said. It's more than enough. They stood closer now, not touching yet. The space between them felt intentional, careful. Elijah spoke again, quieter this time. When you were gone from the cabin during the storm, I realized how used I'd become to your presence. The sound of you moving, the way the place felt less hollow. Hattie looked down, then back up. I was afraid you'd only see me as help, as someone passing through. I see you, he said simply. That landed deep. He didn't reach for her right away. He waited, let her step forward if she wanted. She did. The embrace that followed wasn't sweeping or dramatic. It was solid, grounded. His arms came around her back, warm and steady. Hers wrapped around his middle, holding tight, not out of fear, but relief. She rested her forehead against his chest and closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she had to shrink. I'm staying, she said again, softer now. Not because I have nowhere else, but because this is where I want to build something. Elijah's hand pressed gently between her shoulder blades, protective, certain. Then this is your home, he said, as long as you want it. I've lived long enough to know that love doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives with permission, with space, with the simple relief of not having to run. Spring came quietly in 1880, not all at once, but in signs Elijah had learned to trust. The creek swelled and ran clear. Wildflowers pushed through the thawed ground near the tree line. The cows grew sleek again, their calves wobbling close behind. Life returned the way it always does out here, without asking permission. The cabin had changed. There was an added room now, built solid and square. A new shed stood where the old fence once leaned. Smoke rose from the chimney most mornings, steady and sure. The place didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt lived in. Hattie moved through the days with an ease she didn't recognize at first. Her laughter came quicker. Her steps were slower, deliberate, not heavy with shame, but with care. When she rested a hand on her belly, it was instinctive now. Elijah noticed everything. He noticed how she hummed while kneading dough, how she spoke to the cows like old friends, how the land responded to her presence as if it had been waiting. One morning, as they stood at the edge of the pasture, Elijah smiled, a real one, the kind that reaches the eyes. I haven't smiled like this in 10 years, he said, almost to himself. Hattie looked up at him. Then we're both doing something right. They walked up the hill behind the cabin together, where 2 weathered markers rested beneath a pine. Elijah stopped there every morning. Sometimes he spoke, sometimes he didn't. This time, Hattie stood beside him. I think they'd like you, he said quietly. She squeezed his hand. I hope they know you're not alone anymore. He nodded, and for the first time, he believed it fully. Later, as the sun dipped low, Hattie turned to him on the porch. "Thank you for seeing me. That night in the storm, you didn't look past me." Elijah met her gaze. "Thank you for coming," he said, "for trusting me when you didn't have to." The wind moved through the grass. Calves lowed softly. The world felt wide and kind, and it all came back to one moment, one sentence. "Come with me." Sometimes that's all it takes to change a life. Out here, storms don't ask if you're ready. They don't care how hard you worked, how much you've already lost, or how close you are to giving up. They just take your road, your shelter, sometimes even your last bit of hope. And yet, sometimes, in the middle of that chaos, one quiet choice changes everything. Not a grand speech, not a promise of perfection, just a hand held out, and 4 words spoken honestly. "Come with me." I've lived long enough to know that most of us aren't looking for miracles. We're looking for one place where we don't have to explain ourselves, one person who doesn't ask us to be smaller, quieter, or different to deserve safety. So, tell me, where are you right now, and what are you doing as you reach the end of Hattie and Elijah's story? Would you have trusted a stranger in that storm? Would you have taken his hand? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read them more than you might think. And if you want another frontier story where an outcast woman finds dignity, safety, and a home she never expected, the next story is waiting for you right here.